The Mentalist begins in medias res, in the thick of things. We find out not only that a murder has been committed, but also that a suspect has been arrested. We also get to hear from the parents of the victim, and we see Patrick Jane observing this scene. Right after this, he moves inside the house and puts a kettle on boil and makes himself a sandwich. This is highly unusual for a law enforcement official. He should not be doing this. Technically, this is trespassing. But look at the way the scene is set up. Nothing is rushed, everything is calm. The music carries the scene along by complementing its visual setting, and as a viewer, we feel that there's nothing wrong with what's happening. This is effectively our first introduction to Patrick Jane. He walks into victims' houses and makes himself a cup of tea. But wait, before we proceed, a brief introduction to the video. Hi, today we're looking at The Mentalist and The Monk from a narrative standpoint. We're just analyzing their first episodes and understanding how they set up the character, how the plot unfolds, how the relationships between the main characters and the side characters is established, and overall how the episode sort of plays out. Basically, we're looking at what works, what doesn't work, and why. Great, so where were we? Patrick Jane is making himself a sandwich. Next, he meets the mother of the victim. Notice the first thing he says to her.
Must be tired. I've been watching you and your husband, and I want you to know that I understand what you're feeling right now.
By telling her that he can feel her distress, he's inviting her to open up to him. This isn't unusual for police officials. We're all familiar with the good cop, bad cop routine. However, there's a certain certitude in his approach that feels unfamiliar. To do justice to this scene, we should watch this in full. Let's do that.
You really only pretend to like skiing, right?
Yes.
But you wish you'd been more adventurous when you were younger. You're pleased that your best friend recently gained some weight, about 10 pounds. You love India, but you've never been there. You have trouble sleeping?
Don't understand. You're psychic.
No. Just paying attention.
It's important to note here that we get to see him make his observations and only then make his inferences.
I used to make a good living pretending to be a psychic. I tell you this because I want you to understand there's no point hiding things from me. You know what I see when I look at your husband? I see a warm, loving, generous man. A little vain, maybe. Selfish, controlling, but a decent man.
Yes.
So why do you suspect him of murdering your daughter?
The McCluskey boy did it.
Yes, but you think they're wrong. Why?
I don't know. I don't know.
Tell me.
Last year, they have been so strange with each other. I think that she tried to tell me once, and I didn't. Oh, God.
Did you ask him if you killed her? Most wives can tell when their husbands are lying.
You think he did it, too?
I trust a mother's instinct.
Something interesting just happened here. Patrick Jane just told a grieving mother that she should focus on her instincts. The instincts which tell her that her husband murdered her daughter. Bold move. What I absolutely love about this scene is the incredible contrast that's set up. You've got Patrick's absolute golden retriever face, and you have his instincts which are as sharp as that of a scorpion. Let's see what happens next.
There you are.
I'm the police. Did you kill your daughter?
Notice June's reaction right after her husband responds to Patrick's question.
How dare you?
I asked you a simple question, sir. Did you kill your daughter?
No, I did not. Now you get the hell out of my house.
Here's what's incredible about this scene. As viewers, we find out at the exact same time as our detective that this person has in fact committed the murder. And it's not even spoken out loud at this point. We look at the reaction of the grieving mother and we just know that something's wrong. It's a way of communicating to the audience that, hey, look, we're not concealing any information from you. And that's what I love about this, is that you feel like you're a part of the process. You find out at the same time as Patrick Jane, and you're just as much of a part of the process as Jane himself. So it really does involve the viewer in a significant way. Let's keep watching.
June? June, what's the matter with you? I am gonna make life miserable for you.
An innocent man would have punched me by now.
You come in here, you will cost my wife. June. June, honey, please.
Honestly, it's not as bad as it looks.
Now wait, let's do a quick recap. What have we learned so far? We've learned that Patrick is smart, empathetic, observant, and confrontational. He also doesn't respect rules of house entry and likes to diffuse the tension when things get heated. We also learn about his backstory briefly, but we'll come to that later. And this has all happened in the first 7 minutes and 15 seconds of the first episode of The Mentalist. Oh, and he also solved a murder that was considered closed. Now, let's compare this with Monk. When we first meet Monk, he's at a crime scene with an entire room full of people looking at him for his next move as he does his detective work. So this is clearly some sort of genius detective setup. First thing he says is,
Stove.
It's in the kitchen.
No, I mean my stove. I think I left it on.
okay, so we have the classic setup of mental illness contributes to detective skills, of which I'm not a fan. And while we're at it, here's an obligatory meta-reference to this trope in all of police procedural dramas.
Abed, you're special. Can't you just stand at the scene of the crime and see what happened?
I see a man using a social disorder as a procedural device. Mildly autistic super detectives everywhere. Basic cable, broadcast networks, painful writing. It hurts.
Now, Monk does a good job of introducing the character to us. Its first beat is spent entirely setting up the character following that troubled genius trope. In 4.5 minutes, as viewers, we are familiar enough with Monk's antics because he repeats them so often.
Sometimes it goes out. Do you
It's
remember the
fine.
last time it almost went out?
Do you want me to drive all the way back to the city?
The ending of that first beat is also meant to drive home a critical point, that genius comes at a cost.
Yeah, the living legend.
Just call that living.
But the rest of the episode, it's actually 2 episodes, takes a very different route. One murder becomes 2 murders and then a 3rd murder occurs. Obviously, Monk's initial hunch about the first 2 being connected proves to be correct, obviously. Now when the 3rd occurs, he just knows who's done it, but before he can act on it, he's told to go off into the night because he doesn't belong in the force. Of course this happens because we need the tension. Let's take a closer look at how Monk's character is built out. A lot of Monk's initial representation revolves around his mental illness. I personally found this annoying, not because mental illness doesn't exist, but because in these scenes the character trait is essentially empty. It's used to signal things that the viewers are supposed to already know and accept as reality. We are supposed to excuse his behavior because he's smart, but we have no context on why he's smart. Not every obsessive compulsive person is as smart as he is. As a fellow obsessive compulsive person, I know this fact. Moreover, we don't know why Monk has this illness, except for a passing reference to the death of his wife.
It's a form of anxiety disorder. His wife was murdered 4 years ago. A car bomb.
It is hinted at that he has this illness even before his wife's tragic murder, but we don't know how her death triggers this quote-unquote exaggerated version of this illness in him. That's my gripe with this first episode. Other than that, his character follows the typical manner for all detective characters. Relentlessly obsessive, missing social cues, no respecting boundaries.
I love this part. He does this Zen Sherlock Holmes thing.
We do get a scene of him playing the clarinet. That was quite wholesome, and I thought that was a nice touch.
Knows our song.
I'm sure she heard you.
But beyond this, his relationship with Sharona is interesting. It's not only that she's his nurse, but it seems that she's some sort of mother figure who has to consistently police his behavior when he's not doing detective work. This particular relationship is also highly unusual, so more elaboration would have helped. To be fair, Male detectives and mother figures is a whole other conversation.
I'd be happy to let you spank me.
Beyond this, we have what you might typically expect from a detective. He's excessively smart. There are enough examples of this throughout the episode, beginning with the first scene itself.
No. This was no burglary.
It wasn't.
He wore slippers to avoid leaving shoe prints.
The scene where he rearranges the board, after first messing it up, of course, because he's a child, and then he comments on Stottlemeyer's situation with his wife.
You and your wife, you're having some problems. You missed a spot shaving, and Karen would have caught that. And your necktie, she always ties it for you. She uses that double slip knot.
And so on and so forth. Overall, he's a well-built character with some flaws in the way that he's written, as we just discussed. Now, let's look at the plot and the structure of the episode. This episode clocks in at around 80 minutes, and because of this, it more closely follows the structure of a thriller film. The beginning is the setup, the second act is where the plot thickens, so to speak, and in the third act, the killer is discovered and or brought to justice. The third act of the plot effectively becomes a thriller movie ending, with the viewers knowing who the killer is, and an ensuing chase that, of course, has to end with the killer getting caught. We also see Monk trying to shoot a gun, which is kinda cute. Now, I have no issues with the way the plot unfolds. It hits all the beats of a detective/thriller film, and honestly, it works. But there's one thing I found deeply unsatisfactory, and that was the way his wife's murder was dealt with. It seems central to the plot of the show. Her accident has caused whatever illness or exaggerated version of an illness that Monk has. And while we get enough context around the consequences of this event, we get no elaboration on the event itself. We hear about the accident only in passing, in a comment that Sharona makes. Which brings us to our second point of analysis. The side characters and the relationships they have with each other. In the midst of all these converging and diverging storylines, we get to see glimpses of Monk's relationship with his therapist, his relationship with Stottlemeyer, and his relationship with Sharona. Sharona gets a little bit of airtime with her personal life and her role as a mother. But beyond that, we get to know very little about any other side character or how they relate to each other. Overall, the show does a very poor job of setting up these characters for us. In particular, I was disappointed by Sharona's character. She seems essential to the show, but we learn very little about her other than how Monk interferes in her life. Why does Monk have a nurse in the first place? Does he pay for her himself, or does the state take care of it? The Atlantic City dancer backstory is interesting, but then how does she become a nurse after that? Some more context would have been nice. Also, it seems like Stottlemeyer and Monk used to work very closely together. But except for one passing comment that Stottlemeyer makes about how he did not want to take away Monk's badge and would in fact love to give it back to him, we know nothing about their relationship either. The reason for this, I think, is that Monk's first episode is written like a movie. However, The Mentalist's first episode is written like the first episode in a series. Let's quickly go back to The Mentalist now. How does The Mentalist approach building a character? In one significant way, it differs from Monk. While Monk relies on depictions of troubled genius, Gene's source of deduction is not genius. In fact, he makes a calculated guess based on self-evident everyday truth.
Most wives can tell when their husbands are lying. I trust a mother's instinct.
This is what's most compelling about his character. He's not constructed as a genius. His wisdom comes from having lived life, not from memorizing a bunch of facts and figures. We've already seen how Patrick Jane is shown to be empathetic, observant, and confrontational. The rest of the episode continues in that vein.
You know, so are lovers.
You know what your problem is, my friend? You enjoy your work a little too much. You're a ghoul. Later tonight, when Rigsby asks you to come back to his hotel room, say yes.
Rigsby's an excellent lover, I'm sure. Tough, but fair.
We also get to see an example of him being manipulative towards the end of the episode when he's confronting Dr. Wagner. But before we move to a discussion of the plot itself, we have to look at how Gene's character is fleshed out through flashbacks. And it's not just flashbacks, we also get to witness the myth of Red John. From a writing standpoint, this is done incredibly well. The flashbacks come up organically. First, when Jane is at the crime scene and he's looking at the body and he sees the Red John insignia. And then later, when he's talking to Dr. Wagner about getting some sleeping pills. Interestingly, the flashbacks don't just serve the purpose of giving us more context on Patrick Jane's past. They also build out Red John as a mythical serial killer who has a history with Jane. We also dive into the main murder plot right after the first commercial break. Seeing as that is also committed by Red John, it tells us as the viewers that there's a sense of urgency here, and that's why Jane is there even though he's been suspended. But there's something else we have to talk about when it comes to Jane. Jane is also secretive.
Everything you told me is total fiction, isn't it? Yes. Till you're in real pain, why not tell the truth?
The truth is mine.
And he is relentlessly obsessive about Red John to the point of being possessive about him.
Be reasonable. This is my case. Red John's mine.
Red John doesn't belong to anyone.
He belongs to me.
This is even evidenced in the last scene of the episode, where we see Jane walk into the house in which he discovered his murdered wife and child. He's not washed the insignia off the wall as a reminder of what's happened. This little detail alone tells us more about how obsessive he is than anything else is done in the episode. Now, coming to the actual plot of the episode, there's nothing surprising about who commits the murder. But at the same point of time, the narrative works so well because as viewers, we are also tricked. Typically, a TV show will have two plots going in parallel to keep the viewers engaged. The A plot becomes the main plot, while the B plot focuses on side characters and things that happen to them. In The Mentalist's first episode, the A plot is the murder investigation, while the B plot becomes Jane's inability to sleep and his past with Red John. The reason this episode works so well is because as the episode unfolds, we find out that the A plot is actually the B plot, and the show itself pulls a trick on us, much like Jane himself would. Now, let's talk about the side characters. I like the Mentalist approach to its side characters. While we don't learn too much about any one in particular, we do see a lot of interactions between them, thus setting up possible plot points in the future. Van Pelt has spiritual beliefs, quote-unquote spiritual. Rigsby is obviously interested in her, and food in general, and Lisbon is tough by the book.
Checked luggage? What are you, on vacation?
But she also knows about Jane's antics and has the heart to forgive him as well.
I mean, if you wanted to come back, I couldn't stop you.
In particular, there are two scenes that are my favorite. The first one is where Jane is asking Dr. Wagner for sleeping pills. Look at Lisbon in the background. She's smiling like she knows Jane is up to something. This also suggests that Jane has been doing this in the past as well. And then the last scene, where Jane gives her a frog. That's arguably the most adorable scene in the whole episode. So, even though it's setting up Jane as a smart, manipulative person, he's shown as having a playful, caring side that genuinely wants to connect with someone. The scene where the entire unit is sitting together and having dinner is a great one. Not just because it becomes an excuse for Jane to show off his people-reading skills, but also because it tells us how the group interacts with each other, their camaraderie, and their beliefs. No specific elaboration is done for any of them except for Van Pelt, but the contextual cues really allow us to understand the characters without knowing much about them. Also, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Jane and Lisbon's dynamic.
Sorry I went over your head. I'll redeem myself, I promise.
You want redemption? Be silent.
Okay.
No, I won't say please. Go screw yourself. Jackass. Don't even start. I'm still angry.
I'm sorry.
No, you're not. A frog? Well, this makes everything better, doesn't it?
But beyond all this, there's one detail that everybody misses from the first episode of The Mentalist. Right after the cold open, as the unit gathers at the crime scene, Lisbon says to Jane,
You got a man killed. There's consequences.
Oh, a man that murdered his daughter because she wouldn't have sex with him anymore?
You didn't know that. You did not know that. If she hadn't left a diary...
But she did, though.
At the end of the episode, we find out that he's tricked the murderer into revealing himself by creating a fake diary that supposedly belonged to the victim. What do you think are the chances that the first victim actually had a diary? It's not revealed for certain, but we can make a calculated guess about its authenticity. Now that we've covered both shows in detail, let's conclude our discussion. Both shows are about a central character who's dealing with loss. In Monk, this manifests as his mental illness. In The Mentalist, Patrick Jane builds walls around him and dives deeper into his work. Some of you might relate to that. Beyond this, they treat the side characters differently. In Monk, the side characters serve particular functions. But in The Mentalist, we see that there's this exchange between them and we see how they relate to each other, and it sets up the series for future plot points between these characters. I think Monk in particular doesn't do a very good job of setting up the series. I almost didn't watch the second episode after watching the first one because I thought it would be a very conventional detective series. However, I'm on episode 5 right now, and every single episode except for the first one has broken form from what is considered to be a conventional detective show. So that is something I definitely thought was worth noting about the first episode of Monk. The Mentalist, of course, is one of my favorite shows of all time. I think it does a great job of setting up the main character and the side characters, and in particular the way it navigates the plot is incredible because it plays with the form of what we consider to be the conventional detective TV show format. Overall, I have a slight preference for The Mentalist, not only because it dives deeper into human psychology than Monk, but also because it's just overall a much more fun show to watch, and huge kudos to the camaraderie between the characters for this. If you enjoyed this, please hit the subscribe button. God, that feels awkward to say out loud. But yeah, there's a lot more of this to come, so I hope you enjoy it and I hope to see you soon.